It is necessary to hold the violin so that you are comfortable at all times. Pianists don't have to hold up their instrument. The violinist has to hold it at all times, and it's important to know how the violin is actually held. And many students don't even realize it. They play automatically and sometimes struggle in certain areas because they're not aware of how they're actually holding the instrument. The violin sits on the collarbone, not as is commonly thought on the shoulder. The violin sits on the collarbone and should be placed directly in front of your eyes. Your eyes and nose are looking down the fingerboard directly at the scroll. In this manner, the elbow has to be placed well under the instrument. The violin is sitting on the fleshy part of the thumb, and the chin is holding it here on the chin rest. The elbow, being well under the instrument, then arches the left hand so that the fingertips are rounded. And this is critical because when the hand is in this position, the fingertip will rotate fully and produce the beautiful sound that you want to produce when you eventually get into the vibrato stage. It is also necessary for intonation because the hand is moving. There's an interplay of parts, I must add, because sometimes when we're moving, your chin is down. Sometimes it's simply sitting in the hand. And so we play like that. Now, I'm not at any time gripping the neck of the violin. So the basic position of the violin is sitting on the collarbone, eyes and nose forward down the fingerboard. I personally do not use a shoulder rest. In my opinion, the shoulder rest actually puts the arm and the position of the violin in outer position, actually, because the fingertips are no longer in this position. The violin doesn't sit on the shoulder. I personally don't use it, and I think it's good to say that no great violinist of past or present, I'm talking Heifetz, Milstein, Chrysler, Szigeti, who had a very long neck, very tall man, and more contemporary violins, Isaac Stern, Itzhak Perlman, Pinke Zuckerman, Anne-Sophie Mutter. The best players do not use a shoulder rest, and it's for good reason, because only without a shoulder rest does the violin become part of you. It's part of your body. It's like holding a child in your hand. And you develop that personal tone, the sound with the hand arched like this, that is distinctive of every great artist. A good stance can help a lot. Keep your legs slightly apart, and for the most part, keep your weight on the left leg, because that's the side where the violin rests. If you're going to make a move at all, because we don't want to stand there like a tree trunk, if you're going to make a move at all, you do it with the right leg, but don't move the left leg because you upset your balance. And that's the only advice I can give, except standing up straight helps. Don't play down. Don't tilt your violin down. Keep your violin as level as possible at all times. Up bow. Right? Down bow. Nothing wrong with that. Right then. Up bow. Now, I just noticed something. Would you show us your bow? Let's show us all. Are you going to shoot some arrows before the session is over? Why do you tighten your bow like that? Huh? Is something wrong with the stick?
Weather.
Huh? Weather?
Yeah.
Well, even so, do you need it tighter than that?
No.
Okay. You can press the violin from today to tomorrow, and there's no tone until the bow touches the string. So the bow is the most important tool, the most important feature. The bow has to be well balanced in the hand. The bow should be balanced using all of the fingers. I like to think of the three fingers as being a kind of pyramid. And the little finger I keep hidden like that, because if you extend that little finger and apply any pressure, it's counterproductive to the index finger. The fingers should work at all times together. There has to be complete flexibility of finger movement as well as wrist movement. Everything is directed by the fingertips. Every stroke is developed with the fingertips. Now, there are several schools of holding the bow. I was brought up by an Izai student, a great teacher. His name is Leon Samatini, who taught me the Franco-Belgish school, which basically employs the fingers. The third finger is touching the eye of the frog. I call that little circle the eye. The index finger is never beyond the knuckle. It's before the knuckle. And all three fingers are always working at the same time and working freely. There's no tension in the hand. The middle finger plays a role of meeting the thumb. It balances the other two fingers. The little finger's hidden. I have something peculiar. I let the nail on that little finger grow so I can clip it behind the third finger. I clip it on the bow that way, and it sits comfortably. I don't let the little finger slide. The Franco-Belgian school, which is Izai and Vieton, employs a complete sweeping bow, and with this manner of holding the bow, it's much easier to play at the frog. It's much easier to accomplish things at the frog. Now, I also studied with a great teacher at the Curtis Institute of Music, Ephraim Zimbalist. And Ephraim Zimbalist was a student of Leopold Auer. Leopold Auer was the teacher of all the super great violinists, Mischa Elman, Ephraim Zimbalist, Jascha Heifetz, Nathan Milstein, and so on. They were the best violinists of the 20th century came out of the Russian school. The basic difference in the two schools of bowing is that in the Russian school, the bow is held beyond the knuckle of the index finger. It's held, and the wrist is slightly slanted, so that the little finger, the third finger is not as low, not as deep in the violin, not touching the eye, and the little finger, for the most part, is flying. It makes it a little bit more difficult to play at the frog. You can produce a very thick sound in bowing this way. I'm fortunate to have studied with both schools, and depending on what I play, I change my bowing grip. Do you know that the bow is vibrating at all times? You know that? You know that? If you just put the bow on a string without drawing it, look what happens. Interesting, isn't it? If you play open A, it can be very beautiful. And I've seen this tendency in the last 30 years or so, avoiding all open strings, because we've come into the habit of applying too much bow pressure to everything that we're playing. You really shouldn't be pressing the bow. on your strings. You're not ironing a shirt, you know. You're drawing the sound from the. See that? If the bow doesn't vibrate, that's why I was talking to Elizabeth before. Tightening the bow will not allow the bow to vibrate. I mean, tightening to such an extent. It wouldn't matter if you're playing a fine tourte or Simone, you know, such as I'm using, and just using a very ordinary stick, you know, because these bows have to vibrate. That's why every bow produces a slightly different sound. Now, when you're playing that opening harmonic, you're not allowing it to sound, to sing. Draw your bow. See? It is a wonderful, it's like a flute. Huh? But draw your bow, do that for me. Yeah, no, good. Now I go to extremes. To me, that's a wonderful sound. Yeah. Rather than playing all the time with that energy and that vibrato and all that can become quite dull. I mean, something like this is refreshing, like a nice cold drink. Huh? Do that just from the beginning now. Think about it. Elegant with your bow. Huh? Good. Nice. Keep your rhythm. Don't lose your rhythm. Good. Rhythm. Move your bow. Don't rush. In order to effect a seamless bow change, because we certainly, when playing a lyric moment, we don't want to hear the start and stopping of. That has to be avoided at all costs. So I call it the seamless bow change. When going down bow, you do it more on the flat surface of the hair. Going towards the point, there's a slight turn of the bow, and now you're coming up slightly at the angle. As you're going all the way to the floor, you're again turning and then coming down. So it's this move. It's actually a figure eight. You cannot play angularly. It has to be in circular moves. In 1756, Leopold Mozart, who was the father of the great composer Amadeus Mozart, wrote a treatise on the principles of violin playing. And whatever he put in that book is good today. All the principles are covered, and he makes a particular point of holding the bow, and there is a drawing, actually, of the correct way to hold it, and he calls it the error. And interesting to note, the error is when the fingers are spread apart on the bow like this. Holding it correctly is what I was talking about before, where the fingers are working as a unit. When you do this, you're distributing the strength, and it's actually counterproductive. What happens with a grip like this, or even extending the index finger, is that you're applying false pressure. And when you're applying false pressure, you're going to spoil your sound. You're going to force the tone out of the violin and not let it come out of the instrument naturally. The violin only has a certain maximum of sound. It's not a trumpet. You can't blow harder. And by pressing harder, you're only going to ruin the quality of sound that you can produce. One should not press the bow too hard. Now, there are moments where we're applying quite a bit of pressure, and all the pressure is being applied with the fingers of the right hand. You do not use your arm to apply pressure. The arm at all times must remain flexible, free. Whatever you do in wanting to get a thicker or louder sound is happening with the fingers. Observe, if I'm going to play and start pressing, not a very pleasant sound. Using the same amount of pressure and then drawing the bow quickly, you'll hear something now. You see it? Maybe I'm pressing even more. But the speed of the bow is proportionate to the amount of pressure that you use. It's a very delicate balance, very delicate, in that sometimes we're not even aware of the fact that we're not moving the bow fast enough. And keeping that bow in motion it keeps everything moving freely. And it's so important, because if you're playing, it's a misconception. I was just going to talk about double stops. That's 2 notes at the same time, or 3 notes together. It doesn't take more pressure to do that. It's not pressure that makes 3 strings play at the same time. There are 2 little secrets to that. See, you're playing 3 notes together very easily without forcing at all. Now, if I relaxed in the speed of the bow, it would begin to sound awful. So there's a very fine balance in how much pressure to apply the biting of the bow and the amount of speed necessary to make it sing, and the follow through, which is so important when you go. Or you screw. You see, it stops immediately. The whole follow through it produces the sound. Tone is the magic ingredient of all great players. Without beautiful tone, you can have the finest technique in the world, but without that individual sound, it's not going to matter very much. The gliding technique, as a simple example, is when you're shifting position, you're going from first to third position, from B to D. The guiding finger is the first finger, which remains on the string, but it glides. We don't jump. We don't do that, because then it's like punching a typewriter. The gliding technique makes the violin sound like the human voice. In the downward movement, the thumb leads the way. But in the upward movement, the first finger, or second finger, the second finger as a guide. So there's always the guiding finger for shifting position, not simply jumping to a position. Keep it moving right to the end. Don't put the brakes on. Move your bow. All right. Now, I want you to jump over to the section after where it goes. That's before the cadenza. We try. A rubato is not distortion. It's playing within the rhythmic framework. We don't distort when we're it's something. You're making a huge retard, and it's not in the music. It's not deedle 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 deedle. Here they come, deedle deedle. So you've got to go right along. Now, not so much more. Tempo. So it's keeping within the framework of the whole thing. Don't suddenly hold the note like a bad tenor in the opera. See? Oh, what? Right again. Gentle, gentle. Good. Good. What is vibrato? Vibrato is the rolling of the fingertip going on the higher side and going on the lower side. That's what vibrato is, in slow motion. Now to get a little fast, and you still hear the waving. But now if you go faster, the control of speed is so necessary to make whatever you're playing interesting. Once again, don't tense your vibrato. If anything, widen it and quicken it this way. How do we quicken the vibrato? Bring that elbow further under the instrument. Right. Do from here. See? You want to get a thickness in sound. Don't tighten up. Good. 3, 4, count. One of the major problems, I think, with vibrato is that today it's overdone. It was Leopold Auer that said many years ago. He says vibrato can be a weapon. It can really kill the music, or it can beautify whatever it is that you're doing. But vibrato in excess is not a good thing. Anything you perform, any composer that you perform, you must know something about the life and culture of that composer. You cannot give an interpretation of something if you're not even aware of the country of origin, the manners of the people, basically the culture and sophistication. Without that, you have no approach. You make music, everything will begin to sound the same, and it should not be like that. In the case of Bach, we can't treat this like puritanical music. It's not puritanical music, it's really warm, beautiful music, and it should be treated as such. One must play everything with an amount of imagination. The literal accuracy does not make a great performance. It's only in the recreative role of the interpreter. When you seen through the eyes of an interpreter that has intimate knowledge of the music he's playing, you then can inject your own life and taste into every note that you're playing. In Bach, we can't approach Bach dryly. Yes, there is a Baroque style. There is no one way to play anything. You approach every phrase 1,000 different ways, and it's still valid. It's always valid. But you have to apply some imagination in that you are an actor or actress. You're playing a role when you're playing that piece of music, and you have to transport yourself into the time in which it's written. I wouldn't use the same kind of vibrato for playing Bach as I would for playing the Tchaikovsky. So all of this has to take place in your mind and your fantasy before you begin to play. You put yourself in the frame of mind. Now in Bach, I try not to employ too much vibrato. I try to do it as modestly as possible, but always playing with warmth and sensibility, expressivity. Sometimes I'll hold the note longer than it's supposed to be because I feel that's the way the music should go. Playing literally accurate would be an entirely different story. You remind me when asking that question too, this really applies to bowing. Bowing becomes a very personal matter. It's how you view a piece of music and how you want to apply your bow. For me, the bow is the breathing process. When you're playing up bow, you're inhaling. When you're playing down bow, you're exhaling. It becomes a natural breathing process that takes place at all times. That has to be free and clear. Now, there are many wonderful compositions for the violin, great works. It's a traditional thing to always begin down bow, but one doesn't necessarily have to begin down bow. Sibelius' Concerto opening is for me a classic example. The tonic is D minor. Now, if you close your eyes, it may not make any difference. However, the D minor is the tonic note. Now, I see it as starting up bow. Tonic. Like the wise man speaking. At all times, I'll play expressively, but the bow is my paintbrush. The bow is the thing that makes it. To be starting down bow is already illogical. It sounds like you're looking upside down when you're listening to the music. Another example of this is the beautiful opening of the Bruch Scottish Fantasy, one of my favorites. it's written with the sustaining G coming in out of nowhere. Now in all editions, you'll see it written down below. I'm sorry, I was back in Sabatis. Nothing wrong with that. But I feel that this is a note coming out of nowhere. The movement is marked grave, grave, very. It begins with the brass playing very low, setting a somber tone, like an eerie over the gravesite, you know. So that first note, I fantasize you're coming out of nowhere and gradually being seen. See, I'm pouring all of my fantasy and my heart into every one of those notes, but I'm trying to conjure up a picture of something, not a positive one, but one maybe coming through the haze. Right? Another example of beginning not down bow, but up bow, Franck Sonata. And I'm doing that deliberately because I'm employing the various slides, the sliding technique of all of these great artists of the past. We're so fortunate to have learned from them, and now I'm able to do something with all the colors that are available on my palette. The bow, the fingers, the sliding, the portamento. I want to show you how many different types of slides I'm using in this opening. You might say that's a Milstein style. Now, Fritz Kreisler. Now, thanks, Mr. Heifetz. See, thank you, Mr. Heifetz, for doing things like that. See, perhaps in years gone by, they would have played minimal vibrato. So there's no gliding, everything is note by note by note. And believe it or not, there's a lot of playing like that today. And all because of that, the Inquisition period, which scared everyone to slide or to use any personality. Now, that's the thing that has me baffled, because without personality, without taste that an artist can imbue into a piece of music, it is dry as bone. And it doesn't make any sense, because all the greats of the past made their grand careers with their personality. When you saw Rubinstein at the keyboard, it was arresting. My God, what a style and what a tone he used in playing that instrument. Or Horowitz, where you were hypnotized by the man, just the way he sat there. He didn't move, there were no gyrations, You know, nowadays they're kind of all over the place and moving around and jerking around, and even violinists, in my day that was a taboo. You weren't allowed to do that. You really had to stand still and behave with dignity and do all the expression with the bow and the violin, which is right. This is your paintbrush. But each artist played with his own individuality. You would hear the same composition played 3 nights in a row by 3 great players, and each was great, and each was so different. And that's what I miss so much today. Memorization cannot be taught. It's a process of practicing patiently, repetitively, going over and over and over something. While you're doing that, your eyes are taking a picture of what you're reading on the stand. Without your knowing that, in fact, if you turned your eyes away and someone gave you the same piece of music in a different edition, you probably would think it's a different piece, because your eyes have become accustomed to seeing that in a certain way. Now, constant practice, patience, going over and over. I don't mean 5 times. I don't mean 10 times. I mean taking a line or 2 and repeating it 50 to 100 times, and then closing your eyes and then doing it again. And if it doesn't work, you go back again and start practicing slowly and then build up the tempo. It's patience and diligence. One has to accept the fact that it doesn't come easily. The memorization, the music has to become a part of you. And in actual fact, you're hearing the note a moment before you're playing that note. It happens so rapidly, the brain waves are going to your fingers because you're hearing that, and then going to fingers, and your finger's going to come down something. It becomes motor reflex. But you have to relearn it even then, even after it's all memorized, to know that you're in control of every note you're going to play. It's practice, practice, practice. Enough attention must be given to the fundamentals of playing the violin as well as just practicing your repertoire. I believe very strongly in practicing scales every day and practicing carefully, not just running through a scale. And practicing the etudes of Kreutzer and Rode. It's rather interesting to mention that Heifetz practiced religiously his scales for 1.5 hours to 2 every day before touching any of his repertoire. And I firmly believe that this is so important to establish a solid technique which will then enable you to do anything you want with your violin and to be able to express yourself more freely in the music that you play. Now, practicing, I've touched on this, that is another art, because I've seen some young people practice, and I realized that they waste so many hours in not getting to the source of the problem. They go over and over doing something and not figuring out what it is that is going wrong. Let's take a technical passage. In a technical passage, the only way to go at it is to practice very slowly and then gradually build up the speed. Now, if you've done the groundwork and then it still doesn't go up to speed, then you have to start thinking, maybe the fingerings aren't good for me. Now, fingering becomes a very personal matter. You see in editions fingerings put in by this one or that one, And it may have been good for that person's hand, the one that put it in, but it doesn't serve the purpose for all hands. Some hands are smaller, some hands are larger, some have bigger, longer fingers, some have shorter fingers. You have to find the solution to fingering something for yourself. Oh no, too rough a slide. Gentle, gentle, don't slide like that. Very gentle, so it's like a wonderful singer. We at all times are singing on the violin. The violin's closest thing to the voice. Don't make any jerks like that, you know, it sounds so weird. And again. Now this next is important. I know somewhere along the line an artist recorded that and made a big crescendo in there and made that. Mendelssohn didn't write it. And sometimes it becomes a tradition and everyone is doing the same thing. And I sometimes think of tradition as being the last bad performance. Huh? You understand what I'm saying? Always play what the composer has written. You can't go wrong that way. Editions all editions are available to us today, but most editions are the ideas and fabrication of whoever has edited the music. I think the worst atrocities have been committed with the music of Mozart. I'm very fortunate to have a book of a copy of the manuscripts of his violin concertos. To look at the way he wrote them so clearly, so cleanly, every dot notated when he wants a harder accent, a martelé or a staccato. Everything is so clean. Imagine this man at candlelight and writing so legibly that you could look at it and read off his manuscript. What I'm driving at, though, is the fact that then it was printed and someone edited even the first printing. And all of these wonderful dots that he put in the music suddenly became dashes. When I see a dash in music, I really get turned off. I get furious because Mozart, for the last 250 years, has unfortunately been abused. He's been abused because they're not playing it with the character that he has put into the manuscript. And when I talk about the dash as versus the dot, the Fifth Concerto, here's an example. Here's the way it's been played for 200 years. Why? I don't know. Because it's written with sharp dots. It's different character entirely. It's different music. They try to even purify Mozart. All of his second movements, even written andante, are played at such ridiculously slow tempos, I don't recognize the character of the man. He was full of wit and humor, and boy, he liked to even use dirty language in his letters. And yet everybody tries to play it like a churchman, you see? And it's not that. And the same goes for Bach. The manuscripts of Bach, one is apparently by his wife, a copy of one is original. And this too, I feel, has been abused. Because if you really look at his music, look at his writing, the lyricism, all of this sort of, I'm always fascinated. I keep the Bach, the facsimile of his manuscripts always before me when I practice it, because every edition gives a different idea of what the editor thought how it should be played. And when you see the manuscript, you have an entirely different view on what the music is actually about. There's something I haven't touched upon. When you play Bach or Mozart, the use of open strings is terribly important. And in more recent years, there has been the tendency to get away from playing an open string or a harmonic. The open string is the best way to keep yourself in tune, because when you play an open string and the next note you're playing is a little bit sharp, you're going to know about it. And yet if you cover every note, it doesn't make any sense. The open string can sound so beautiful because the bow is vibrating. And at the same time, if you're not pressing the bow, if you're not pushing hard, it has a wonderful sound. Take the opening of the A minor. It's a wonderful sound. I think it's like a wood flute when you do something like that. If you cover everything, for example, you could play, which is the way it's usually played. Nothing wrong with it. But to me, the has more of the maybe old world character. If we want to play Bach, if we're playing Sibelius or Tchaikovsky, it's a different matter, but it is Bach. And Mozart, I think, has been absolutely the most abused. The appoggiatura and the grace note has been totally, everything became appoggiatura, changing the character of most of the second movements that he wrote, because there's always, you can see kind of a joke that he makes out, the wit that's there. And the wit is taken away, everything becomes serious, and Mozart was not a very serious person from all that we put together. Some of my more recent students are garnering top prizes in competitions. Last year, Stephanie Jong, the talent that I've nurtured since she's 8 years old, won the Paganini competition and the competition at Aspen, Colorado. And the most recent prize winner was Ray Chen, marvelous young violinist, who won the Queen Elizabeth Prize.
Sure.
Remember something. A hair slower, and it'll sound faster, as long as it's even. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going always too fast, you can't catch up with yourself. Sure. Always remain under control. Just a hair slower, you're going to be much better off. Just start with this big dot.
Okay. Sure.
And you know the pizzicatos. Take your time so that you can play these two evenly. Right.
So that's okay.
Right. That's it. You should
Down,
do
down,
those
down?
down,
Okay.
down, instead of the up. The up is not as effective. And the two down bows will call you pulling back just a little bit on the tempo. Where does that stop?
Here.
Yeah, take your time on the G string.
Okay,
Two
yeah.
down bow.
What's that from here?
Okay.
At the age of 15, I auditioned for Curtis and was accepted. That's when I started studying with Mr. Rosand. It was a good time, I think. He helped me in a lot of ways. Got rid of some very bad habits, I would say, and encouraged me and was really great. Such a great player. I have to look up to. I've just got to try and play almost like, it's easier when you have a teacher who plays rather than a teacher who doesn't. So for me, it was easy to kind of almost copy, I'd say, a little bit. His style, something to, at least you have a point to look at.
Being a role model with violin in hand does help, but it's interesting because I recognized Ray's talent when he played his audition at Curtis. He had wonderful, wonderful hands, wonderful fingers. He has extraordinarily long fingers, actually, very, very long hand, which in Ray's case are beneficial because he does things with it. I remember when you first came to me, I had to turn your hand around because you weren't getting much tone out of your violin and shaping and getting this position, but you with the longer fingers, you're playing with your thumb in a position that I would never recommend to anyone else because of the length of the finger, and you do so marvelously because you play so beautifully in tune. Intonation is impeccable, but it's something I wouldn't recommend for others. There's not a standard measure that you can use. It depends entirely on a person's hand because every person has different hand. But I recognized Ray's extraordinary affinity. His technique was already quite developed. I remember Paganini Caprice that he played that impressed me very, very much. And I decided that he was going to be a worthwhile student. And as it turned out, there's only so much that a teacher can teach a student, and then the student has to take off. Ray is one of those examples because he has all the instincts. You're born with those instincts. It's these ingredients I can't even put into words whatever it is, because Ray is capable of doing anything on his own now, and to make it sound very much like himself. And I'm so happy that I was a role model in a sense to get him started, so that he would show his personality, individuality in developing the beautiful sound that he has now.
We worked together towards the Brussels competition. I remember going several trips to the house, and it was a really wonderful experience to, we worked together. It was almost like we practiced together, 6 hours a day.
And that was rough on you?
I'd say it was okay.
You took it. Sometimes.
I like it. YCA here in the States was able to, through them, loan me this terrific Stradivarius. It's 1721, the Macmillan Stradivarius, and it's a marvelous instrument. I'm so grateful to have it. Well, in learning a new repertoire, a new piece, usually what I like to do is perhaps, if it depends on what it is, usually I'll have heard it before. If it's something I haven't played, like a Beethoven sonata, one that I haven't played, I'll usually have heard it before. And so I'll have some kind of idea. If not, I usually like to listen to it, maybe listen to it played by somebody, I like my teacher, for example, or someone, another violinist that I think is Heifetz, or one of the Milstein, Oistrakh, one of the masters, and then have my own ideas, and then learn it. I will definitely come back after I've graduated. I think we've already talked about this, to continue studying with him. I hope. The last time we talked about this was a while back, so but he's promised me that he will continue to listen to me.
Keep beating him up. The door will always be open. teaching and carrying on the tradition that I have learned is an important mission for me. I feel that to carry on the tradition of the golden era of violinists, I seem to be the last survivor of that period. And to teach the tradition is vital, because for a number of years we haven't heard playing in this tradition. That is, playing with emotion, playing with personality, giving music a sense of style, but observing, being very honest to what composer, what is in the music. And the fact that a couple of my young people have garnered these major prizes will tell you that even music making, it becomes trendy, because maybe that grand tradition that I'm so proud of is now being recognized again, because music making had become so dry. And my pupils are playing with tone. And I've spent my life with the violin since the age of 3.5, and love the violin even more today, and I can't imagine a life without music.